Chronicle of a Great Lakes Giant. Measuring 729 feet in length with a width of 75 feet and a depth reaching 39 feet, the Fitzgerald stood as the most massive lake freighter ever constructed at the time of her launch in 1958. These proportions represented the absolute size limit for any vessel intending to traverse the St. Lawrence Seaway. Lawrence River locks en route to the Atlantic Ocean. Nevertheless, this American marvel had a singular objective: to transport taconite from the iron-rich lands of Minnesota's Arrowhead region to the industrial steel plants bordering the eastern stretches of the Great Lakes. Throughout its operational life, the ship fulfilled its duty with unwavering efficiency, consistently surpassing previous cargo records across its 17-year tenure. Although it never reached the Atlantic, the vessel managed 748 complete voyages between the mining areas and the manufacturing centers, but its 749th journey would be marked by misfortune. On the morning of November 9, 1975, the Edmund Fitzgerald faced its final test. The doomed crossing. In the port of Superior, Wisconsin, the morning greeted the Fitzgerald with calm weather, cloudy skies and a gentle southeast wind at about 5 knots. Nearly 800 miles to the southwest, a disturbance high in the atmosphere was beginning to move northeastward. This atmospheric instability spurred the formation of a surface low-pressure system over the southern high plains, which intensified as it tracked northeast. By early afternoon, the Fitzgerald departed the harbor, heavily burdened with over 26,000 tons of taconite pellets, en route to Detroit. Simultaneously, meteorologists from the National Weather Service were monitoring the advancing low-pressure system, projecting it to move directly over Lake Superior the next day, an ominous forecast for freighters navigating those waters. As a result, a gale warning was issued for the lake. Not long after, the SS Arthur M. Anderson, under the command of Captain Jesse Bernie Cooper, set out from Two Harbors, Minnesota. The Anderson soon made visual contact with the Fitzgerald, and the two vessels agreed to sail together, providing mutual support as lake conditions steadily worsened. They chose to steer toward the northern Canadian shore, hoping the terrain would buffer the heavy waves anticipated by the next day. By 7 p.m. local time, the surface low had dropped to 993 millibars, causing a tornado outbreak in eastern Iowa. Throughout the night, wind and rain intensified from the northeast. At 1 a.m., the Fitzgerald reported experiencing wind speeds of 52 knots and wave heights of 10 feet. Alarming weather reports from multiple vessels led the National Weather Service to escalate their gale warning to a storm warning. At daybreak, both the Anderson and Fitzgerald crossed from U.S. waters into Canadian territory. The storm's center now hovered over Michigan's Upper Peninsula, recording a pressure of 982 millibars. Around noon, the ships encountered a rare moment of peace as the eye of the storm passed directly over them. But behind the center of the low, conditions grew even more dangerous. Cold air rushed in from the northwest, transforming rain into heavy snow and drastically reducing visibility. Navigating the narrow channel between Michipicoten and Caribou Islands, Captain Ernest McSorley of the Fitzgerald sent a distress call to Captain Cooper of the Anderson. "Anderson, this is the Fitzgerald. I've sustained some topside damage. I've lost a fence rail, 2 vents are gone or broken, and I'm listing. I'm slowing down. Will you stay with me until we reach Whitefish Point?" "Roger that, Fitzgerald." The Anderson tracked the Fitzgerald on radar, just a small blip 9 miles ahead. At 3:30 p.m., the situation worsened. Half an hour later, another transmission came. "Anderson, this is the Fitzgerald. I've lost both radars. Can you give me radar guidance until we make it to Whitefish Bay?" "Roger that, Fitzgerald. We'll update you with your position." For the following hour, the circumstances aboard the Fitzgerald grew increasingly dire. Ahead of the two freighters sailed the Avafors, a Swedish ore vessel en route to the Atlantic. Captain McSorley radioed a general call, asking if anyone could confirm whether the Whitefish Point light and radio beacon were operational. With both of the Fitzgerald's radars down, they were virtually navigating blind. The Avafors confirmed the light was visible, but they couldn't lock onto the beacon signal. What followed was a chilling exchange between ships. "The wind is screaming down here. How are things on your end?" "Don't let anyone out on deck." "Say again, Fitzgerald." "We're listing badly, both radars gone, and taking massive waves over the deck. This is some of the worst seas I've ever faced." "Did you say both radars are down?" Back aboard the Anderson, sustained winds reached 65 miles per hour, with hurricane-force gusts exceeding 80. Just before 7 p.m., Captain Cooper spotted two enormous rogue waves, each about 35 feet high, barreling toward them from the starboard rear. The surging water swept across the Anderson's deck, slamming into the pilot house and inflicting some damage. Despite the blow, the ship held firm. Soon after, First Mate Morgan Clark radioed the Fitzgerald. "Fitzgerald, this is Anderson. Have you slowed down?" "Yes, we have." "How's your situation?" "We're holding steady." "All right, I'll check back later." But that later never came. Just 5 minutes after their last exchange, the Fitzgerald entered a snow squall, vanishing from the Anderson's radar. It never returned. When the snow lifted, no lights or signs of the ship could be seen. Upon reaching the relative safety of Whitefish Bay, the Anderson alerted the Coast Guard. With no nearby rescue resources, the Coast Guard asked the Anderson and another freighter, the SS William Clay Ford, to do the unthinkable: head back into the raging lake to search for possible survivors. The two ships courageously braved the storm, but their efforts yielded only fragments of wreckage. The 29 men aboard the Fitzgerald were never found. What followed the tragedy? It took a full 3 days before a U.S. Navy aircraft, specialized in anti-submarine operations, finally picked up evidence of the Edmund Fitzgerald's wreckage. Shortly after, a Navy-operated submersible vehicle made a formal confirmation, verifying the identity of the lost freighter. The remains showed that the first 250 feet at the bow and the last 250 feet at the stern were mostly preserved. The front section was still standing upright, while the back end had flipped and was resting upside down. Other freighters, such as the Anderson, a vessel of the same build and class as the Fitzgerald, endured the same storm, but only suffered relatively minor damage. So what exactly caused the Edmund Fitzgerald to go down? The disaster appeared to be the result of multiple contributing factors. A number of official investigations were launched to uncover the true cause of the sinking. Unraveling the mystery, theories and inquiries. Both the U.S. Coast Guard and the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, launched official inquiries to determine the cause behind the loss of the Edmund Fitzgerald. After over a year of detailed analysis and examination, the Coast Guard released its findings, yet it stopped short of pinpointing a single definitive cause. Their most plausible theory? Seawater entering the cargo hold through faulty hatch seals during intense wave activity on the deck. Taconite, the iron ore the ship was transporting, is extremely heavy. Even when fully laden, the Fitzgerald still had unused capacity in her cargo space. When the wreck site was surveyed, several hatch covers were discovered either missing or visibly damaged, including some with signs of external deformation. If water steadily infiltrated the hold during the storm, the accumulating weight would have caused the ship to tilt, which may have ultimately led to its sinking during the worst part of the gale. The NTSB would later come to a very similar conclusion, supporting the hatch failure scenario. However, this conclusion was fiercely challenged by the Lake Carriers Association. Captain Jesse B. Cooper of the SS Arthur M. Anderson, who had closely trailed the Fitzgerald through the storm, publicly disagreed with the official verdict and presented a very different explanation. According to Captain Cooper, just before Captain McSorley's first distress transmission at 3:30 p.m., he observed that the Fitzgerald was uncomfortably close to an area known as 6 Fathom Shoal, just north of Caribou Island. This area lies only 11 feet beneath the surface. Cooper believed that if the Fitzgerald had run aground amidships there, it could have broken railings under tension and structurally weakened the hull. In 1976, a year after the tragedy, the Canadian Coast Guard conducted a new survey of the region and discovered a previously uncharted shoal, just a mile east of 6 Fathom Shoal and directly in line with the Fitzgerald's final known course. This discovery further reinforced Captain Cooper's belief that the vessel may have already been slowly sinking by the time McSorley reported damage. In Cooper's opinion, a leaking vent or hatch wouldn't have caused the ship to list so rapidly. He also pointed out another potential contributor: structural hull failure. Similar to grounding, this would involve a complete compromise of the ship's hull due to metal fatigue stress, the progressive weakening of a structure under repetitive loading. As the first ship designed to fit the maximum dimensions of the St. Lawrence Seaway, Seaway Max, the Fitzgerald was notably long and slender for a bulk carrier. Some former crew members remarked that in rough seas, the ship would visibly flex like a diving board. This repeated flexing could, over time, fatigue the welded joints that held the hull to the keel. In such a scenario, either the storm of November 1975 or a slight contact with the shoal might have been enough to cause a catastrophic fracture. This idea gained renewed attention years later when the Fitzgerald's sister vessel, the SS Arthur B. Homer, was retired and dismantled shortly after undergoing a full overhaul. When the NTSB requested to inspect the ship's structure, the shipbuilder denied them access, sparking speculation that the welded hulls of these vessels may have been structurally inferior to older riveted designs. Despite this, the NTSB dismissed both the grounding and fatigue failure theories, citing a lack of visible physical evidence on the portions of the Fitzgerald's wreck that were available for inspection. Still, their counter-argument was limited. The central section of the ship, where the greatest structural stress would have occurred, was the most heavily damaged part of the wreck, making a conclusive determination almost impossible. Whatever ultimately happened, the ship's end was clearly swift and devastating. The complete lack of any distress call suggests that the Fitzgerald may have been hit broadside by a towering wave that instantly overwhelmed the forward deck and bridge. That could have been followed by additional waves forcing their way in, possibly crushing the hatch covers inward, something consistent with the observed wreckage, and allowing thousands of gallons of water to rush into the forward holds. Whether the hull was already compromised or not, the added weight forward would have been too much for the ship's structure to withstand. It may have snapped in half, breaking apart the mighty freighter. The suddenness of the disaster led many to connect the two massive rogue waves that Captain Cooper witnessed aboard the Anderson just before losing radar contact with the Fitzgerald. These waves, traveling in the same direction as the Fitzgerald, could have intensified even further over the open water. A ship already worn down by stress and damage might not have been able to endure their force. Among the many theories surrounding the tragedy, this remains one of the most haunting. Modern analysis of the 1975 storm and its lasting legacy. Weather undeniably played a pivotal role in the fate of the Edmund Fitzgerald. 3 decades after the tragedy, meteorologists from the National Weather Service revisited the storm, using advanced computer simulations to reconstruct the atmospheric conditions of November 1975. One of the most important findings from this retrospective study showed that the northwesterly winds were not only intensified due to vertical air mixing, but also because of how the topography of Michigan's Upper Peninsula influenced airflow. When combined with the long, uninterrupted distance, known as fetch, across which the wind was able to stir the lake's surface, these elements helped generate massive, growing wave heights. The unfortunate reality was that the Fitzgerald sailed directly into the fiercest zone of this meteorological onslaught, both in terms of wind and wave intensity, right at the worst moment. Researchers also discovered that a storm of such magnitude was not exactly an anomaly on Lake Superior. In fact, The return interval, or how often a storm like this could be expected, was estimated to be roughly once every 2 years. What made this storm distinct, however, wasn't just its strength. Most Great Lakes storms send waves traveling from north to south. This one was different. Its waves moved from west to east, a much less common direction. According to all historical weather data, no other documented storm on Lake Superior had ever produced waves exceeding 20 feet traveling west to east. This fact only affirms the haunting final statement made by Captain Ernest McSorley, a veteran of 44 years navigating the Great Lakes. He had never encountered conditions as severe as those seen on November 10, 1975. Though the cause of the Edmund Fitzgerald sinking is still debated to this day, the tragedy did lead to a series of important safety reforms that significantly improved security across the Great Lakes shipping industry. The Fitzgerald remains the largest ship ever lost on the Great Lakes, a wreck steeped in mystery and enduring fascination. Her memory, and that of the 29 crew members who perished with her, lives on through the solemn and powerful 1976 ballad, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, by Gordon Lightfoot, a tribute that ensured their story would never be forgotten.